Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from RAU'S IAS Study Circle. Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today, let us discuss the important news which has appeared in the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 11th May 2020. The news to be discussed has been displayed on your screen and timestamping for the same has been provided in your description box below. So let's start our today's discussion. We are proud to announce RAU'S IAS hybrid online program to prepare for the Civil Services examination of 2021. The program is designed in such a manner that it will ensure same quality content at your home as we deliver here at our campus. It also gives you the flexibility to join our campus as when you are ready to join the physical class program at our learning centers. Our GSI hybrid course has been designed to provide 360-degree guidance. First, our teaching covers everything from basics to advanced, and given the dynamic nature of the exam, we focus on both the static syllabus as well as the current affairs. Second, we focus a lot on discussions and doubt solving to be able to impart real understanding of the issues involved which are important for the examination. And so, we promote group discussions and make expert doubt solving available to you at all times. Third, testing is another key requirement to crack this exam. So the course gives you ample practice through class test and UPSC level test series. Finally, just before the prelims and mains examination, we help you revise everything important through our highly targeted revision modules. And if you want more information, you can log on to our website and download the GSI hybrid brochure. The description of the video has the link for that as well. You can get in touch with us using your preferred way. All the necessary details are given in the brochure, so please refer to that. From the entire team of RAU'S IAS Study Circle, we wish you all the very best and we will be happier to partner with you in your journey of success. The first news to be discussed appears on page number 1 and also appears as a continuation on page number 8. It says, norms issued for restart of industrial units. First week is test run period as per the National Disaster Management Authority. So according to this news, the National Disaster Management Authorities has issued certain guidelines with respect to restarting industrial units, however with certain safeguards. And one of the safeguards is that first week should be utilized as a mere test run and industry should not function at its peak or at its highest capacity. So the National Disaster Management Authorities has issued guidelines with respect to restarting of industrial units and accordingly has provided certain guidelines for district authorities, the industrial units itself for the restart, storage and manufacturing facilities in these industrial units and also with respect to workers who works in these industrial units. So let us go through these important safeguards as provided by the National Disaster Management Authority. Now the question arises is that what is the need for these NDMA guidelines with respect to gradual start of these industrial units? Now prior to this guideline, earlier some industries have been allowed to function. However, some of these industries are not following government standards of procedure with respect to safety norms. So accordingly, the government wants all the industries to first of all follow the standards of procedure with respect to safety of workers as well as that of the machineries and parts of industrial units. So it says that due to several weeks of lockdown and the closure of these industrial units during the lockdown period, it is possible that some of these operators might not have followed these established SOPs. So accordingly, the government wants these industrial units to follow these SOPs, that is standard of procedure. Further, need for cleaning of industrial facilities. So because of this lockdown period, most of these manufacturing facilities such as pipeline, valves, etc. may have residual chemicals which may pose certain risk. And the same is also true with respect to storage facilities with hazardous chemicals and flammable materials. And also considering the latest disaster at Vizag, the NDMA has issued this particular guidelines specifically with respect to cleaning of industrial facilities so as to avoid any future disaster. The next aspect is the need for sanitization of the industrial units. Further, it mentions about lack of maintenance of machinery parts during the lockdown period. So it highlights that when heavy machinery and equipments are not maintained periodically, they can become dangerous for the operators or engineers. Further, there is a need for safety codes for hazardous chemicals and also for other important industrial units such as open wires, conveyor belts, as well as automated vehicles, which make manufacturing facilities a high risk environment for the workers. So it highlights that improper enforcement of safety codes and improperly labeled chemicals can further pose serious health hazards. So again in this regard as well there was a need for a proper NDMA guidelines and also with respect to response during any disaster. So it says that when an unexpected event occurs, managing rapid response becomes challenging. And in order to minimize the risk and to encourage a successful restart of the industrial units, the following guidelines are being issued. So these can be said to be some of the reasons why the National Disaster Management Authority has issued particular guidelines with respect to reestablishing the industrial units. So as already mentioned that these guidelines are issued specifically with respect to district authorities, restarting industrial units, storage and manufacturing and also for the workers. So let's go through the specific highlights of these guidelines. Now with respect to district authorities, the guideline says that the state governments must ensure that off-site disaster management plan of the respective major accidental hazard units are up to date and prepared for any kind of disaster, and for this the district magistrate or the deputy commissioner of the particular district shall be responsible. So major accident hazard installation means an isolated storage and industrial activity happening at a site which handles other activities of the industrial units including transport through carrier or pipeline of hazardous chemicals equal to or in excess of the threshold quantities. So it is in this regard that the guidelines has advised that all responsible officers of the district including district magistrate shall ensure that the industrial on-site disaster management plans are also in place and cover standard operating procedures with respect to restarting the industries during and after the COVID-19 lockdown. So this particular guideline is specifically for the district authorities. Now, the other aspect of the guideline is with respect to restarting the industrial units. So, hereby the guideline says that the first week shall be considered as a trial or test run period to restart these industrial units, and it must ensure all safety protocols and should not try to achieve high production targets. So, this becomes an important aspect. Further, these industrial units shall manage their equipments as per the safety protocols during the restart phase. And to avoid any further industrial disaster, those workers who work on specific equipments must be sensitized and must be made aware of the need to identify abnormalities like strange sounds or smell, exposed wires, vibrations, leaks, smoke, abnormal wobbling, irregular grinding, or other potentially hazardous signs which indicate the need for an immediate maintenance or if required the shutdown of the industrial unit. So these specific workers who work on these specific equipments must be sensitized and made aware of these irregularities with respect to functioning of the industrial units so that a future disaster may be averted. And in this regard, it says that in case of any further difficulties, these industrial units and their operators can approach the district magistrates or the deputy commissioner to solve any problem arising in their industries. So these are the guidelines with respect to restarting the industrial units in any particular area. And in this regard, if there are any particular problems arising therein, then these operators or industrial units can approach the district magistrate or deputy commissioners of their particular jurisdiction. The other guidelines is with respect to storage and manufacturing process, whereby it says that storage facilities must be checked for any damage or wear and tear. Further, a complete safety audit must be carried out for the entire manufacturing units before starting production activities. And in this regard, there is a need for proper cleaning of manufacturing units if necessary before restarting these equipments all over again. Now further, the guideline highlights that there is a need to ensure arrangement for round-the-clock emergency crews, professional technical teams provided with major accident hazard places and cluster of such major accident hazard places. And with respect to any disaster taking place, these round-the-clock emergency crews and professional technical teams must be able to cover 200 km in order to provide their technical expertise so as to reduce the impact of disaster. So these are the guidelines with respect to storage and manufacturing process. Now lastly, the guidelines appears for workers as well. Now there are various aspects with respect to guidelines for workers who work in the industrial units. The first is with respect to sanitization. So it says that there is a need to ensure 24-hour sanitization of the factory premises, including common areas which is frequently visited by the workers. And these common areas, after these workers have visited them, must be disinfected every 2 to 3 hours. So there is a proper guideline with respect to sanitizing the entire industrial unit, especially the common areas visited by the workers. Further, there is a need for an entrance health checks. So temperature of the workers who are entering the premises should be checked twice, and workers showing symptoms should not report to work. Further, the industrial units must provide for hand sanitizers as well as masks for all the workers. Further, the guidelines provide for educating all staffs, including workers, so that they can take necessary precautionary measures against COVID 19. Further, the guidelines also provide for quarantine measures for supply and storage of goods. Further, the guidelines also provide for social distancing norms as far as possible in the industrial units. Now, the guidelines also provides for working in shifts. It says that for such factories that works 24 hours at full production capacity should consider 1 hour of gap between their shifts, except factories requiring continuous operations. And another important aspect is that with respect to managerial and administrative staff of these industrial units, these managerial and administrative staffs must function at 33% capacity. However, with respect to maintaining the 33% capacity guideline for managerial and administrative staff of an industrial unit, priority should be given to personnel dealing with safety norms. So, the guideline highlights that even to maintain 33% occupancy, priority should be given to such personnel who deals with safety procedures of the industrial units. And lastly, if someone is tested positive in the unit, then adequate factories have to prepare accommodation and quarantine facilities to isolate these workers if at all required. So these are the guidelines provided with respect to the safety of workers who are working in these industrial units. Now the National Disaster Management Authority has issued these different guidelines under the following rules, namely the Guidelines on Chemical Disasters 2007, the Guidelines on Management of Chemical Terrorism Disasters 2009, Strengthening of Safety and Security for Transportation of POL Tankers 2010. Now, these two guidelines are specifically with respect to relevant chemical industries. And lastly, the Manufacture, Storage and Import of Hazardous Chemical Rules 1989 under the Environment Protection Act of 1986, as they provide statutory requirements for these industries. So these are the important guidelines specifically with respect to district authorities, restarting industrial units, storage and manufacturing, and also for the workers working in these industrial units as provided by the National Disaster Management Authority. Now this topic becomes important primarily from your mains perspective under GS paper 3, specifically with respect to disaster and disaster management. And from your prelims perspective, questions can be asked on these guidelines with respect to polity, economy, as well as disaster management. Now, from your prelims perspective, you must know about certain important aspects of the Disaster Management Act of 2005. So, let's revise very quickly some of the very important highlights which can be asked in your upcoming prelims examination of 2020. First, the chairperson of National Disaster Management Authority is the Prime Minister of India, and similarly, chairperson of State Disaster Management Authority is the Chief Minister of a particular state. Now there are two aspects. First is National Executive Committee to assist the NDMA, and on similar lines there is also a State Executive Committee to assist the State Disaster Management Authority. Now the chairperson to the National Executive Committee is the Union Secretary to Disaster Management, and National Executive Committee can constitute subcommittee for efficient discharge of their functions. Now there are three aspects here. First is the national plan, second is the state plan, and third is the district plan. Now let's see. The national plan can be made for disaster management for the whole of the country, and this plan for the whole of the country shall be called the national plan. Similarly, there shall be a plan for disaster management for every state to be called the state disaster management plan. And with respect to district plan, there shall be a plan for disaster management for every districts of the state. So with respect to the plans, there are three plans at the level of national, state, and districts. It highlights that a national plan shall be prepared by National Executive Committee having regard to national policy and in consultation with the state governments and expert bodies or organizations who works in the field of disaster management, and this has to be approved by the national authority, that is the National Disaster Management Authority. Further, with respect to State Executive Committee on the lines of National Executive Committee, it is headed by the Chief Secretary of each state, and such Chief Secretary shall be the chairperson. Now, on the lines of National Disaster Management Authority, there is a State Management Disaster Authority and also a District Management Disaster Authority. So, these Management Disaster Authorities functions at the level of national, state, as well as district. So, it says that the District Disaster Management Authority, whereby the collector or district magistrate or deputy commissioner shall be the chairperson. So, the chairperson for District Disaster Management Authority shall be the collector or the district magistrate. Now, there are certain important aspects mentioned here. It says that the elected representative of the local authority shall be the co-chairperson of District Disaster Management Authority. Now, this becomes an important highlight from your prelims perspective. Another important aspect is that in the tribal areas, as referred in the 6th schedule of the Indian Constitution, the chief executive member of District Council of Autonomous District shall be the co-chairperson of the District Disaster Management Authority. So, with respect to District Disaster Management Authority, three aspects becomes important. First is the fact that collector or district magistrate or deputy commissioner shall be the chairperson. So, this becomes the first important aspect. Second, the elected representative of the local authority shall be the co-chairperson. And third, with respect to tribal areas under 6th schedule of the Indian Constitution, the chief executive members of the District Council of Autonomous District shall be the co-chairperson. So these three important highlights you must remember from your prelims perspective with respect to District Disaster Management Authority. Further, the Act provides for National Institute for Disaster Management, National Disaster Response Force, National Disaster Response Fund, and National Disaster Mitigation Fund. Now, the National Disaster Response Fund is a special fund to meet any threatening disaster situation or disaster in a country. And in this fund, the central government shall deposit an amount after due appropriation made by Parliament by law, and also includes grants made by person or institution. So again, these aspects becomes important with respect to National Disaster Response Fund. And with respect to National Disaster Mitigation Fund, it is exclusively for the mitigation projects to be credited by central government. So the central government shall credit this amount in this National Disaster Mitigation Fund after due appropriation made by Parliament by law in this behalf. So again, these two funds from the perspective of prelims becomes very important. So in a nutshell, we are trying to understand some of the important highlights of the Disaster Management Act 2005 on which questions may be asked in your prelims examination. So this summary again becomes very important. So after understanding these important aspects, let us move on to our next news discussion. The next news to be discussed appears as a lead article on page number 6. It says, the trends shaping the post-COVID-19 world. Now this article highlights that because of the COVID-19 situation, it will overall result in change in global world order. And this overall change in global world order post COVID-19 will also result in new geopolitical trend lines. And these trend lines can be observed with respect to a rising Asia, retreating United States, conflicted European Union, paralysis of global world forums including WTO, G20, G7, etc., as well as energy crisis in the Middle East, as well as for other oil producing countries considering the decline in price of the oil in recent times post COVID-19. Now, a rising Asia will lead to more assertive China. However, apart from China, the economic position of India will also strengthen along with other Southeast Asian nations. So in this regard, the new geopolitical trend of rising Asia becomes important, whereby we will see a more assertive China ready to assume more global responsibilities. And this will also be because of the fact of retreating United States, whereby the United States will shift from its present policy of America first to that of America alone. Now, in this respect, it's important to understand that the United States presidents, including Barack Obama, had understood the futility of their investment in the Middle East. So, accordingly, the United States plan a strategic move out from the Middle East, including Afghanistan. So, we see a retreating United States as of now with the policy of America first, which can then convert into America alone as suggested in this article. Now, even former President Barack Obama of United States understood the heavy expenditure of US Treasury because of their military presence in the Middle East, including Afghanistan. So, sensing this extra expenditure by the United States in the Middle East on its military, Barack Obama suggested the idea of leading from behind. And this was the first signal of a retreating United States in near future. And this retreat from Middle East, including Afghanistan, will continue even if there is a change of leadership in United States after the November election of 2020. So, in this regard, the author has highlighted that even after the presidential election, which is due in November in United States, this trend will continue whereby United States will continue to retreat. So, in this regard, the author says that US still remains the largest economy and the largest military power, but has lost the ability to lead. And according to the author, this mood of retreat by the United States is unlikely to change despite the outcome of the presidential election, which is due in November 2020. So, in this regard, we can see a more assertive China because of retreating United States. And this increase in power for China as it ready itself to assume more global responsibilities will definitely raise a concern for two countries, namely United States as well as India. Now, US-China relation in modern times has seen from the areas of cooperation to competition to confrontation, and this further might lead to conflict between these two countries. So, with respect to this change in global world order, there is a chance that the conflict between United States and China will increase. So, it will be interesting to see where will India stand between the conflict between United States as well as China, especially on trade fronts. Now, another important aspect highlighted in this article is with respect of conflicted European Union, whereby most of the countries within the European Union there are certain conflicts, as there is already a north-south divide even among the European Union countries, especially with respect to the global financial crisis of 2008. Another important aspect highlighted here is with respect to paralysis of global world forums, including World Trade Organization, G20 as well as G7. Now here, with respect to the COVID-19 situation, the World Health Organization has emerged as the leading organization to take a charge with respect to responding to situations of COVID-19. However, the role of WHO has so far been discredited by United States as it has appreciated the role of China with respect to responding to the measures of COVID-19. So again we see a paralysis of global forums including that of World Health Organization. And lastly, with respect to the energy crisis, the author highlights that because of the declining prices of oil in the Middle East as well as for oil producing countries, it might not only lead to economic crisis for these Middle East countries as they are solely dependent on oil, but it might result in regime changes in the future. So, in this measure, the author has mentioned that rising nationalism as well as protectionist measures might prolong the economic recession in the world post COVID 19 situation. And because of all these global conflicts, there are greater unpredictability and more turbulent times which lies ahead. So basically, the author in this article has mentioned about a change in global world order post COVID 19, and he has provided reasons specifically with respect to new geopolitical trend lines on account of rising Asia, retreating United States, conflicted European Union within themselves, paralysis of global forums such as WTO, G20, G7, etc., as well as energy crisis in the Middle East. Thus, this topic becomes important primarily from the mains perspective under GS Paper 2, specifically with respect to global groupings and agreements involving India or affecting India's interest, effects of policies and politics of developed and developing countries on India's interest, as well as important international institutions. The next news to be discussed appears on page number 10. It says, NIV, that is National Institute of Virology in Pune, develops tests to detect antibodies. So, this particular news highlights that the National Institute of Virology has developed an immunological assay to detect antibodies which is present in an individual because of fighting coronavirus. So, it says that this test will help in detecting these antibodies that the body develops in response to the infection caused by the coronavirus. In this regard, you must know that ELISA test is routinely used to detect HIV infection. So this topic becomes important primarily from the perspective of general science in your prelims examination. Now, in this regard, you must know about the term immunological assay. It says these immunological assays are a biochemical test that measures the presence or concentration of a macromolecule or small molecule in a solution through the use of an antibody or an antigen. So basically, in an immunological assays, through a biochemical test, it detects the presence or concentration of a macromolecule in a solution through the use of antibody or antigen. Now, it's important to know that antigen causes disease and antibody fights that disease. Further, in this regard, the enzymes are popularly used in these immunological assays to track antibodies as well as antigens. So, these immunological assays is basically a kind of biochemical test which finds out the concentration or presence of either antibodies or antigen present in the human system. So, accordingly, this highlights that the NIV, that is National Institute of Virology in Pune, has developed an immunological assay, which is an enzyme linked immunoabsorbent assay to detect antibodies which the body develops in response to infection by coronavirus. Now, with respect to presence of antigens in our human system, antibodies are produced by the system from 1 week to 3 weeks. So, to find out any kind of antibodies through the ELISA test, it is important that the virus has stayed in the body for at least more than 7 days, or that is more than 1 week. So this is with respect to the antibody test which is to be done through the ELISA test. So in this regard, it says that this is the first time India has developed an indigenous ELISA test for coronavirus, and this test will detect the immunoglobulin G antibodies which is present in blood samples. Now, the other types of antibodies present in the system are IgA antibodies, IgM antibodies, IgE, as well as IgG antibodies. Now, immunoglobulin G is a type of antibody, and it represents approximately 75% of serum antibodies in humans. Further, these immunoglobulin G antibody is the most common type of antibody found in blood circulation. So another important point to be remembered here is that the ELISA test for coronavirus will detect the immunoglobulin G antibodies present in the blood samples. So with respect to this ELISA test for coronavirus, let us go through some of the other important aspects. It says that it has the advantage of testing 90 samples together in a single run of 2.5 hours. So basically in 2.5 hours, approx 90 samples can be tested together. So this can be said to be one of the added advantage with respect to ELISA test for coronavirus. It says that ELISA test has inactivated virus, and there are also minimal biosafety and biosecurity requirements as compared to the real-time RT-PCR test. Now here it's important to note that RT-PCR test detects the presence of antigen in blood, whereas ELISA test with respect to coronavirus will detect the antibodies present in the blood. So these are the two differences with respect to ELISA test for coronavirus and RT-PCR test. Further, RT-PCR test detects the RNA of the coronavirus, and it enables detection of the current infection. Now, one of the problems with respect to RT-PCR test is that it will provide a negative result if testing is carried out days after the infection is cleared. However, the antibodies present in the body because of fighting those antigen or the coronavirus still remains even after 1 to 3 weeks. So basically we can say that antibodies developed in the system to fight coronavirus remains for a longer period as compared to the antigen. And accordingly, it highlights that antibodies developed in response to the coronavirus infection will be present in the blood for a longer duration, and both together can be used to detect recovered patients. Further, it highlights that robust antibody tests are critical for surveillance to understand the proportion of population exposed to the coronavirus infection, as the antibodies remain for a longer period of time in the blood sample, and within 2.5 hours, approx 90 samples can be tested together. However, there is one problem with respect to this ELISA test for coronavirus. It says that ELISA test is based on detection of antibodies, and it takes 1 to 3 weeks for the antibodies to develop in the system in response to the corona infection. So it cannot be used to detect a recently infected person, as the antibodies are not developed by the system very quickly in response to the antigens present in the system. So this can be said to be one of the disadvantages of ELISA test for coronavirus, as the antibodies takes more time to develop in the bloodstream. So this topic becomes important from your prelims perspective. Here you must understand that the ELISA test will detect antibodies, whereby this test will detect the immunoglobulin G antibody. The next news to be discussed appears on page number 5. It says, tying up with Todas to keep the virus at bay. Traditional tribal artisans from the Nilgiris are producing masks with exquisite embroidery. Now, this particular news highlights about the traditional Toda artisans from the Nilgiris, and you can see that these are the pictures with respect to their traditional art of embroidery. So it says that Toda artisans from Nilgiris are now using their skills to produce stylish masks for local residents. Now, Nilgiris is generally visited by tourists, but because of the national lockdown because of coronavirus, there is now a lack of tourists, and this has decreased the demand for Toda embroidered shawls, quilts, or even clothes. However, because of the increase in demand for Toda designed masks, this has given the artisans an opportunity of livelihood in these uncertain situations. So, in this regard, you must know about the Toda artisans from the Nilgiris. And another important aspect to be remembered is that Todas are PVTGs, that is, particularly vulnerable tribal groups from the state of Tamil Nadu, as declared by the central government. So, these aspects becomes important from your prelims perspective. Now, with respect to Todas, we can say that these are the people of Dravidian ethnic group who live in the Nilgiri mountains of Indian state of Tamil Nadu. Now, Toda lands are now part of Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, which is a UNESCO designated international biosphere reserve. The Todas tribe is largely dependent on buffalo herding as well as embroidery for its livelihood. And the Toda tribals have their own language, which does not have a script. So, this aspect becomes important from your prelims point of view. Further, it says that the once thriving Toda tribe has fewer than 1,000 members as of today, and the Todas are one of the particularly vulnerable tribal groups from Tamil Nadu. So, these can be said to be some of the important aspects about the Toda tribe. Further, the particularly vulnerable tribal groups is enlisted by the Ministry of Tribal Affairs of Indian government, and these are the PVTG tribes of the state of Tamil Nadu. These include Erular, Kattu Nayakan, Kota, Kurumbas, Paniyan, and Toda. So, from your prelims perspective, this topic gets covered under human geography, specifically with respect to the Toda artisans, and also with respect to polity, as Toda community is also a particularly vulnerable tribal groups in the state of Tamil Nadu, as declared by Ministry of Tribal Affairs of Indian government. The next news to be discussed appears as an advertisement on page number 3. Now, this advertisement is with respect to venture capital fund for scheduled caste as well as backward classes. So, this advertisement mentions that this is first of its kind venture capital fund dedicated to promote entrepreneurship among scheduled caste and backward classes entrepreneurs by providing concessional finance. So, in this regard, you must know about the venture capital fund for scheduled caste as well as for backward classes. And for this purpose, the government has declared IFCI as the nodal agency. Now, this scheme has been launched by Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. So, this again becomes a very important aspect from your prelims perspective. Now, moving on to some of the important objectives of this scheme, it says that it is a social sector initiative to be implemented nationally in order to promote entrepreneurship among scheduled caste population in India. Further, it says that it promotes entrepreneurship among scheduled caste who are oriented towards innovation and growth technologies. So, under the scheme, they provide concessional finance to the scheduled caste entrepreneurs who will create wealth and value for the society. And the aim is that these entrepreneurs will create wealth and value for the society, and at the same time, they will also help in promoting their profitable business. Further, it says that the assets so created under the scheme will also create forward backward linkages, and this will further create chain effect in the locality. It simply means it will help in bringing other members of scheduled caste as well as backward classes within the fold of entrepreneurship. and thereby will help in overall wealth creation in the society by more participation of such members. So, in this regard, one of the objective is to increase financial inclusion for scheduled caste entrepreneurs and also to motivate them for further future growth of SC communities. Another objective is to develop SC entrepreneurs economically and also to enhance direct and indirect employment generation for scheduled caste population in India. So in this regard, this particular advertisements not only provides for scheduled caste but also for the backward classes. So in this regard, this particular fund becomes important from your prelims perspective, and the fact that it is launched under Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. Now after our discussion, these forms are summary for prelims 2020. Now today we discussed about the norms for restarting industrial units, especially with respect to district authorities, worker safety, storage and manufacturing of equipments in the industries, and also maintenance of industrial units. Further, we also went through the entire prelim summary for Disaster Management Act 2005, whereby we went through the important aspects with respect to Disaster Management Act 2005. Now all these aspects which we have discussed becomes very important from our prelims perspective, and questions can be framed on either of these topics whichever we have discussed here with respect to the Disaster Management Act of 2005. Moving further, we also discussed about NIV developing ELISA test for novel coronavirus, and this test is with respect to testing or detecting the antibodies, namely the antibody IgG. And there are four types of antibodies, namely IgA, IgM, IgE, as well as IgG. So the ELISA test will detect antibodies with respect to the coronavirus. Further, we also mentioned about RT-PCR test, which basically detects the antigens. And we also discussed about immunological assays, which is basically a biochemical test of antigens as well as antibodies. So these also becomes important with respect to the developing of ELISA test for coronavirus. Next, we studied about Toda artisans who are from Tamil Nadu and mostly reside in the Nilgiris. Now they are famous for their embroideries, and the Todas are also a PVTG, that is particularly vulnerable tribal groups as declared by Ministry of Tribal Affairs. And lastly, we discussed about venture capital fund, which is for the purpose of entrepreneurship of scheduled caste as well as of other backward classes. And this venture capital fund for scheduled caste is provided under Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. So all these becomes important highlights with respect to your prelims examination. Now we also discuss the lead article from the mains perspective, whereby we discuss that change in global world order post COVID-19 and new geopolitical trend lines, basically with respect to a rising Asia, retreating US, conflicted EU, paralysis of global forums, as well as energy crisis, especially in the Middle East. So taking cues from our discussion, we can say that these aspects becomes important from the mains perspective, and in this regard, questions can be framed by UPSC with respect to the changing global world order, specifically with respect to a rising China along with a retreating United States. So from our mains perspective, the position of India amid changing world order becomes significant, specifically with respect to a strong and rising China, retreating United States, conflicted European Union, paralyzing global institutions, and reshaping of energy markets. So from all these aspects, any questions from your mains is quite possible. So today, these forms are summary for prelims as well as for our mains examination. Now even question for your mains examinations can be framed from these aspects which we discussed as summary for prelims, as direct questions may be asked either on ELISA test, on Toda artisans, venture capital funds, etc. So all these topics must be understood in a very comprehensive way so that questions can be answered either in prelims examination or in the mains examination. Now after our discussion, this forms your question for the day. The question is, consider the following statements about Toda tribe. First, they are the pastoral tribes from Nagaland. Second, they form particularly vulnerable tribal group of Tamil Nadu. And third, Todas are famous for their embroideries. So the question is, which of the statements given above is are correct? Options are A, 1 and 2 only, B, 2 and 3 only, C, 1 and 3 only, and D, 1, 2 and 3. Now coming to the answer of yesterday, the question was, consider the following pairs. First, Lipu Lake, Himachal Pradesh. No, this is incorrectly matched as Lipu Lake is in Uttarakhand. Second, Nathula, Sikkim. Yes, this is correct. And Shipkila, Himachal Pradesh. Yes, this is also correct. So the question was, which of the following pairs given above is are correct? So here the correct answer was C, that is 2 and 3 only.